NFL free agency is on fire right now with all the moves being made, which is something that isn't really expected. The NFL kind of has things that they'll have a signing here and there, but not just a bunch of things all at once. That's something you kind of expect in the NBA every year, where everything gets done early, a lot of big moves, a lot of stars changing teams, which we definitely saw this past offseason. Right now, the regular season is on halt. Made a video about that, and it's very unfortunate. And even in baseball, for once, this past offseason, players were getting signed much earlier, especially the marquee guys like a Garrett Cole, like an Anthony Rendon, compared to the year before where you had Bryce Harper and Manny Machado have to wait so late before they got their big contracts. But for the NFL, they've been, making a lot of storylines and just giving something for people to talk about, particularly sport fans, instead of the delays and all the unfortunate things like the report that just came out. Baseball possibly late July, and then the NBA is going to be played in August, and it just looks absolutely horrible, and it's still extremely disappointing, and it's really sad, and all the NBA fans and all the sports fans and players are bored. You watch all these NBA guys who are all playing video games and what have you, which is what the fans pretty much have to do the same thing if you are in that younger demographic like these NBA guys. I mean, somebody like Donovan Mitchell, who thank God is healing really well, he is 2 days younger than me, and he's staying home playing video games all day, and I'm pretty much going to have to do the same thing because, like I said, as someone with asthma, I don't want to take a chance, but nobody should really take a chance. Like, if you're not in a job where you're like emergency personnel or it's like life or death, going to work or not, stay home. You know what I mean? Don't let this thing spread. Don't let yourself catch it, and then the other people around you, let your family catch it, because that would just be very unfortunate for all those people involved. So again, at least the NFL is giving us something to talk about, and there is a lot to talk about because a lot of big moves have happened, especially the most recent one, the David Johnson for DeAndre Hopkins trade. That was a big surprise for me, honestly. Because the thing is that, we know DeAndre Hopkins regards one of the top receivers in all of football. And the Houston Texans had a pretty good year last year. And David Johnson with the Arizona Cardinals, they're obviously in a rebuild mode. David Johnson suffering the injury last season, so he really didn't have much of an impact at all. And now for him to get traded for a guy of DeAndre Hopkins' caliber, I think that's really interesting. The thing about this trade is that on the Houston Texans side, it is very tricky because obviously we know that Deshaun Watson is a good quarterback and Houston had a pretty good year last year. But it's like, okay, well, what else can we do to maximize the offense around Deshaun Watson? And one of the things that this makes me ponder is that, are they going to try to run the ball more with Deshaun Watson, kind of similar to what the Baltimore Ravens do with Lamar Jackson? And they made a big move as well, signing Calais Campbell. I'll get to that later. But still, it's just I really wonder if that's going to change the way offenses are run. I'm also curious to know what kind of impact this is going to have on the Arizona Cardinals. This should help Kyler Murray develop and be able to do more with his arm, because one of the things we're also going to get to when we talk about Ryan Tannehill is just the fact that it's you could have quarterbacks that have really good speed and can run the football. Guys like Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson and Kyler Murray. But if you can't make the big throws and your receivers can't get open, it isn't going to matter, because you can't win a Super Bowl just having your quarterback run and not throwing the ball. It is impossible. And those teams showed you that. The way the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson was able to make the critical passes against the Tennessee Titans. And the same thing for Deshaun Watson, not being able to keep up with the passing of Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Arizona Cardinals not even making the playoffs. It shows you just that, even though we are in the age of the running quarterback, you still need a quarterback that can run but doesn't have to run. The way Patrick Mahomes had the mobility to make all the big plays, and he made it with both his legs and his arm at the same time, because the 49ers put Patrick Mahomes under so much pressure that he had to make a lot of throws on the run while he was moving. So even though Patrick Mahomes didn't have to necessarily scramble for positive yardage or have any read options or quarterback runs, the fact that he was able to just evade the pressure a little bit to get the ball to his targets, Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill or all these other guys, Sammy Watkins having a big game, he's able to do that because he could do both. And that is what these teams have to do. You have to be able to pass the ball and run the ball. So I wonder if that's kind of what the Arizona Cardinals are going with. I don't really know what's going on with the Houston Texans getting David Johnson. Maybe they want to run the ball a little more, having David Johnson there and hoping that he can bounce back from his injury But how is this going to affect Deshaun Watson? Because it's like, what's going to be his go-to target now? That's going to make things a lot tougher for him throwing the ball. And like I said, it is very important. And then the question is, like, do the Texans want to maybe move Deshaun Watson? That's something that a couple people are saying. I don't think they're going to do that, nor that they should do that, because he is so young and he is a really good player. I mean, he was somebody that was kind of in the MVP running at a stage in the season. Eventually, it became Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes was the top three guys. But still, Deshaun Watson is a good quarterback in this league, and I don't like that they had to take DeAndre Hopkins from the team. And I'm curious to see what the Texans are going to be like next season, because after making the playoffs, I really believe that Houston took a step back here. So I'm curious to see what other moves they're going to try to make. Are they in a rebuild mode? What are they doing with their salaries? There's definitely a lot of questions that the Houston Texans are going to have to answer. But speaking of salaries, let's talk about the franchise tags, because this is the most they had since 2012. The franchise tag, it's a pretty cool thing with the way you're able to kind of just hang on to the expiring free agents just a year longer and really give them something to play for. And again, just be able to maintain your guys, because that's something that has become very hard, in the modern era. I think a perfect basketball example is what happened to OKC when, James Harden had to leave, and obviously you had all the other guys depart. But the way it's like, you could have a really good team, but it's so hard to retain all those star players, because with salary caps, there's only so much money you could give around. So there were some definitely questionable decisions for franchise tags and moves that had to be made. And it's going to impact the way the offseason is going to be run for particular teams like the Jets and Giants. So let's get into it. The Arizona Cardinals using the transition tag on Kenyon Drake. That makes sense, especially considering that they traded David Johnson right afterwards. Kenyon Drake, obviously better with Arizona than he was with Miami. Same for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Miami has definitely had a lot of struggles, but it makes sense for Arizona, so we'll see what that trio looks like of Murray, Drake, and DeAndre Hopkins. Baltimore Ravens putting the franchise tag on Matthew Judon makes a ton of sense. This was something that was talked about all of last year, because he was one of their big guys that was on the expiring year of the deal. The Ravens have relative youth, and a lot of their other guys are locked up long-term. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's extremely young. Mark Ingram is there for multiple years. Earl Thomas is there for multiple years. You still have years on Marlon Humphrey. They already re-signed Marcus Peters during the course of the regular season. So Marshall Yanda retired. And there's just a lot of youth on that team. Guys like Mark Andrews and Orlando Brown Jr. There's a lot of young players on that team. So they don't have too many salaries to worry about that much as far as expiring contracts. So it makes sense that you could retain Matthew Judon for another year just to see what happens. And I think that was a good move by the Ravens, because he was their best pass rusher that was able to get sacks. And next season, he might not be their next pass rusher with the addition of Calais Campbell. And I'll get to that after the tags. But Cincinnati Bengals, they put on A.J. Green. You have to. A.J. Green is a major part of Cincinnati. We saw how horrible they were without him. And I'm really curious to see what he's going to be like when he does come back. And Cincinnati should be a little better. They still have to make a lot more moves before they are a better team, especially in the Ravens and the Steelers and the Cleveland Browns division. That is a tough division for Cincinnati to do well in. This was a really big one. The Dallas Cowboys deciding to franchise tag Dak Prescott. And obviously, Dak Prescott had been a really big storyline throughout this course of the offseason. We know that the Cowboys have to decide what they're going to do with him, because he is their quarterback right now. And we've heard the rumors, maybe they want to get Tom Brady and trade Dak Prescott, which, I mean, in the short term, I don't even think it makes that much sense, because the thing is that, we know how great Tom Brady is, one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. I'm not going to deny that. But Tom Brady wasn't good down the stretch in the season, because he had that really bad game against Miami and he had the bad game against Tennessee. Whether he had his targets or not, obviously he doesn't have Gronkowski anymore, but the thing is that Brady just didn't look as good, and it's he obviously needs a good offense around him. He's not a guy where you could just put Tom Brady with a bunch of not so great options and him just make it work, kind of like the way Russell Wilson is able to do. So Tom Brady does need weapons, and Dallas has weapons. I mean, they have that great offensive line, and now they have to decide what they want to do with Amari Cooper. You have Ezekiel Elliott. And it makes sense for the Cowboys to do it a little bit. But I still think that Dak Prescott, at this stage right now going to next season, might be better than Tom Brady. So especially long-term, even if the Cowboys did have him, it was only going to be for a year or two at most, I feel like. So Dak Prescott, this has been a really weird thing. I know a lot of people are not happy about this decision to franchise tag him, and neither am I, because the thing is, the Dallas Cowboys, my thing for them is what is the alternative? Dak Prescott is going to have to be the guy for them, so you might as well keep him. I mean, he has done a good job. The Dallas Cowboys, they win games. They don't go deep into the playoffs, but at least they get into the playoffs. Dak Prescott's not giving you any off-the-field problems, which somebody like Ezekiel has, but has gotten the money. So I do think that was really odd. And now we're going to see what they end up doing with Amari Cooper. Are they going to give him a big deal and just leave Dak Prescott on the franchise tag? I think that's really unfortunate. And now it's like Dak Prescott has tried to be a model citizen and not really cause too much problems within the organization. But now he might have to do a little lockout or not play and things like that, like the way Ezekiel Elliott did. I'd be curious to see if Dak Prescott even wants to play and if he wants to try to make a statement by not participating and just be like, listen, I deserve a contract. I mean, look at what I've done and I have nothing to show for it. Meanwhile, somebody like Ryan Tannehill gets the big contract, and that's the franchise tag that made me the most mad, the Derrick Henry one. We'll get to that when we get to Tennessee. The next one, Justin Simmons with the Denver Broncos, makes sense. Good young safety, you could understand that. This was a big one. The Jaguars franchise tagging Yannick Njoku. That was big, particularly for the New York Giants, because I know that he had been a big-time target for a lot of fans, and including myself. I really thought that Njoku could have helped the Giants because they do need pass rush. We've said this for years now. We know they need offensive line and they need defensive line. They need to protect their quarterback and then put pressure on the other team's quarterback. That's a major part of football. I mean, everyone says it. You have to win the battle up front. You need a good offensive line and a good defensive line. That's why the Ravens making that move for Calais Campbell was a big deal for them to improve their defensive line. So for the Jaguars, I mean, I understand them wanting to keep Njoku, but the thing is that, like, Jacksonville, after trading Campbell and all the other players they've gotten rid of, they have a long way to go. So I don't even know why they decided to do it and give all this money to him when they're not going to be competitive. So I think that was interesting. I think this has more implications for the Giants than it does the Jaguars, honestly, because the Giants need him, because the Giants do want to win games. Meanwhile, Jacksonville, you just don't know what is going on there. I mean, they gave all that money to Nick Foles, and he was hurt, and they just don't know what they're going to do. Gardner Minshew, like, it's just very tricky what's going on in Jacksonville. Kansas City Chiefs putting the franchise tag on Chris Jones makes sense. If we talk about how important the defensive line and offensive line is, Kansas City winning the Super Bowl last year, Chris Jones was a part of that. He was their big guy in the middle of that defensive line. So he is important to the Chiefs' success, and it obviously makes sense to maintain him. Chargers keeping Hunter Henry. Okay, I understand it. You want to keep all your weapons for your quarterback, whoever that may be. One of the teams that Tom Brady's looking at is the Los Angeles Chargers. So you want to have somebody to throw to. Hunter Henry is a good option. Minnesota Vikings maintaining Anthony Harris. Having Anthony Harris and Harrison Smith in that Vikings secondary definitely makes sense. Minnesota is built on their defense. They gave an extension to Kirk Cousins, which, I mean, similar to Dallas, it's like, I understand it because, like, what is the alternative? Like, I don't think Kirk Cousins is a great quarterback. I don't think he's a top 5 quarterback. I mean, he's okay. I don't think he's going to win a Super Bowl, honestly. And it's just like, for the Vikings, since they're not going to have another quarterback, they just want to keep him and give him a lot of money because he's already getting paid a bunch. I think they could have waited on the extension because maybe another option would have presented itself, whether it is via the draft or free agency, or they could trade for somebody else. I just don't think that Kirk Cousins is the guy, so I don't know why you would extend him and tie yourself up to him even more. So I do think that definitely was interesting that the Vikings gave him that extension, but putting the tag on Anthony Harris, I understand it. The Patriots putting the tag on Joe Thuney, that makes sense. Another guy that both the Giants were looking at and the Jets could definitely use. Again, we know how important offensive line is, especially for both those teams, protecting those young quarterbacks, providing the lanes for their star running backs, Saquon Barkley and Le'Veon Bell. So now that Joe Thuney is not one of the options, that definitely hurts because I know that is someone that the Giants also could have definitely used. Speaking of the Giants, they put the franchise tag on Leonard Williams. And we know that the Leonard Williams trade was not a smart move by New York. That was not, the move that was really going to take them over the top. And we talk about getting the big pass rush and putting pressure on the quarterback and really deciding the way games are won at the line of scrimmage. Leonard Williams is not that guy. Like, we watched it with the Jets and even the couple games with the Giants. He just doesn't really jump off the screen that much and is a major difference maker. And it's like the Giants, they gave up draft picks to get Leonard Williams, so it's like they had to keep him. So I understand why they did the franchise tag. It's still a dumb move 2 times over. It was dumb to trade him, and because you trade him, you had to use your franchise tag on him. So you have all this money committed to him, to a player that you could get better than him. Like, you still need to work on your offensive line and a lot of the other areas of the football team. So that's just what the Giants decided to do with him. Pittsburgh Steelers putting the tag on Bud Dupree. You know what? It makes sense. Again, like linebackers, defense is important. So want to maintain him. That makes sense. Buccaneers also keeping a linebacker in Shaq Barrett. I get it. Really curious to see what they're going to do at quarterback with Jameis Winston because, like the Chargers, Tom Brady's interested in them as well. So Brady is like the next big domino and the domino because that's going to decide what the Chargers are going to do, what the Buccaneers are going to do, what the Patriots are going to do. So it's really going to make three teams act based off one move. So I think that is really important. The Chargers have talent, so maybe that will be ultimately what Tom Brady decides. Maybe he wants to chill out in Tampa and have some nice weather. I can understand that as well. So it is going to be very interesting to see what Tom Brady decides. And so this was my big one. The Tennessee Titans putting the tag on Derrick Henry. I was really upset about this. For me, I just believe that Derrick Henry carried the team and was such a big difference maker for them. And Ryan Tannehill comes in, and the Titans, you know what, they win a couple more games. You know what, they get into the playoffs. But the thing is that, like, again, he didn't have a huge impact in that Ravens game or that Chiefs game. It was Derrick Henry or the Patriots game. Like, it was Derrick Henry in all those games, and it was through the course of the regular season. So the fact that the Titans were able to get into the playoffs, I understand why they wanted to keep Ryan Tannehill, but I just don't think that he deserved that much money. Like, if you want to keep Tannehill, okay, he's not a franchise quarterback. He's not going to win you a Super Bowl. But the fact that this guy got 4 years, $118 million, and Derrick Henry just gets a franchise tag, that is just so wrong in my opinion. I think that Derrick Henry deserves every single penny he wants for carrying that team, and again, just being such a difference maker. Tannehill was not a major difference. He wasn't $118 million difference maker. Derrick Henry is. Ryan Tannehill is not, because the Titans were good even with Marcus Mariota. And I'm not saying that Mariota is better than Tannehill. I'm just saying that Tennessee was still able to do well with him. So it's like the team wasn't that much different. It's just the fact that they got Derrick Henry the ball enough. Vrabel said, I don't care. I'm giving the ball to Derrick Henry, and that's it. Derrick Henry's going to throw the ball like he did against the Ravens for a touchdown. So to me, I'm just disappointed, and I feel bad for Derrick Henry because I feel like he deserves the big contract, and eventually, hopefully, he better get it. And, I mean, you'd like to see it with Tennessee, stay with the same team and what have you. But I just don't think that was the right thing to do to him. You know, put Ryan Tannehill as a bigger priority than Derrick Henry. I mean, you know, good for Tannehill that he was really able to turn his career around. He was a guy that looked like a real failure, definitely in Miami, being a backup and what have you. Then coming to Tennessee to, again, be a backup and all of a sudden get $118 million off a nice little second half stretch. Whew. That's really is cashing in on having a hot stretch. So I guess good for Tannehill. Not great for Derrick Henry. He deserves the big contract, and he deserves it now. And lastly, the Washington Redskins agreeing to an extension with Brandon Sheriff. So that's another guy that is off the radar for both the Giants and Jets because this is another offensive lineman that, again, both of them could use. Offensive line and defensive line, they are just so important, and it's like that's another target that is off the board for both teams. And now it's like there's going to be Jay Conklin, and then it's going to have to be in the draft. There's one of the better offensive lineman drafts you're going to find, and the Jets and Giants, they're at the top. So maybe both of them do take an offensive lineman. It wouldn't surprise me, and I wouldn't hate it, really, because it's like you have to start somewhere, and it's just so important to build up the offensive line because it's like, you know what? You could be a team like the Cleveland Browns who made the move to get Austin Hooper. So another big-time target. But here's the thing. You have Baker Mayfield, and you have Nick Chubb, and you have Odell Beckham, and Jarvis Landry. Now you have Austin Hooper. Wow, that's a lot of great guys at the skill positions. You have so much talent on the offensive end of the football. But Baker Mayfield cannot get the ball to all these targets if the offensive line is not protecting him, and Nick Chubb can't have a big impact if the offensive line is not creating lanes for him to run through. So it's like you could have all this talent, but if you can't protect the quarterback, it doesn't even matter. So if the Jets and Giants want to get the most out of their quarterback and running backs, they do need the offensive line. So that's why I think if they have to draft them, they will. And speaking of the draft, close to the public, will go on as scheduled though, late April. So that is interesting considering, like I said, the delays with basketball and baseball has just been so awful. And again, very boring and upsetting. And who knows, maybe I'm going to have to start doing gaming on the YouTube channel instead if there isn't that much going on in sports, because I still do want to make videos and make a career out of some type of sports reporting or sports writing. So I just think that who knows what the next step is going to be for any of us. Not only has there been a lot going on with the offseason, but the NFL is able to get this new CBA passed, and that is a big deal because there are some pretty big implications and changes going on in the sport of football. So the big thing, there's two of them really that really stand out. Number one, the extra game for the 17th game of the regular season. That's really wild because a lot of the star players were not for that, because it's just like you preach player safety and health of the players and whatnot. I think what's going on with the virus right now, all these things being suspended, no fans and all the delays and what have you. But it's just like you're adding an extra game to one of the most physical sports that has a lot of injuries, CTE and craziness like that, where these players losing their lives earlier than they should, and just the long-term impact it could have of all the damage they're taking to their brain based off this contact violent sport. So I think that was really wild that the NFL was able to get it passed, and they really had to sweeten the deal. And I believe that the way they did it, number one, they cut out a preseason game. Good for them. You know what I mean? Like, that's a good thing to do because there are too many preseason games. I really believe they could have even cut down to 2. But, I mean, I guess they're trying to be stingy. And the fact that they charge such a crazy amount for preseason games, which are awful, by the way, that they still charge that amount of money is absolutely ridiculous. So, I mean, I guess that was one of the things they did to sweeten the deal. We'll take away a preseason game if we give you an extra regular season game. Again, more money. Because the thing is that what you do get is you'll get more money from the TV aspect of it. Because even though ticket sales, I don't think you're going to pack out a preseason game, but you would pack out a Week 17 game, because that could be a real big indicator when you think of the teams that they finish 8-8 or 9-7. That one extra game maybe can make the difference between who makes the playoffs and who misses the playoffs. And it's also going to be more important because the other thing happening, and that is adding the more playoff teams, which is something that we kind of talked about with these other sports and what have you. And that's going to be a big thing too because of the 8-8s, the 9-7s, which now are going to be like 10-7s or 9-8s, and have all the different combinations with having a 17th game as far as what the records are going to finish as different numbers. So it's going to be really weird to see what's going to happen, having an extra round with the first round buys. So football, it's going to be different, having those kind of changes. And the other big change was that the CTC, not the CTE, the CTC, I'm sorry, THC, I don't smoke, so I don't know the actual letters, but the weed is really the thing. The suspensions, no more. No more testing, and that's a big deal because that is something that has been going with the NFL forever, where these players, they just keep getting caught over and over. You think of somebody like Josh Gordon. Gordon would get suspended, and he had to get reinstated because of all the violations that he had. And now, don't have to worry about that anymore. So the weed thing definitely is a big deal because of how many suspensions there always are. And think of the thing that Le'Veon Bell did last year when he was talking about all the dirty needles that were going into his arm because they kept wanting to test him and whatnot. So I do think that is a big deal. You know what I mean? No more weed. That is a big one for the NFL. And no more, I'm going to try to put it in, no more Stephen A. Stay off the weed.
Stay off the weed.
So no more of that. And that is a big deal. But the NFL, they also increased player revenue going from 47% to 48.5%. They're also doing more for former players, increasing the pension, increasing the money that the former players get. That's good, you know what I mean? Because some of these guys, they can get in trouble when their post-playing career is done. If they didn't invest their money correctly or spend their money correctly, they could be either bankrupt or in debt and stuff like that. So the fact that they're getting some more money, good for them. NFL players, they make plenty of money as it is. So they also, this deal is going to work through 2030. Having football going for another 10 years, don't have to worry about any work stoppage or, guys going on strike or any drama or controversy going on. So that is good. And obviously football is going to change. So you have the extra game. You have more playoff teams. You have all these players changing teams. One that just happened, the Dallas Cowboys agreeing to a contract with tight end Blake Jarwin, 3 years, $24 million. So again, Dallas Cowboys trying to upgrade those skill positions because they made the moves that it takes for the offensive line. They were willing to draft Tyron Smith and Travis Frederick and Zach Martin, use first-round picks on offensive line 3 times, and it worked because the Dallas Cowboys have one of the best offensive lines in all of football. And you know what? They got some other guys to fill in for the other positions, but still, it's like when there was a top offensive lineman out there, they got him. So I think the Giants and Jets probably have to do the same thing. The offensive line, you have to do it one piece at a time, even if it's 1 year at a time, because eventually if you can lock those guys up, it will be worth it because the Dallas Cowboys, they're knocking on the playoffs every single year. Meanwhile, the Giants have been a laughingstock, and the same with the Jets. They have not been able to just get a winning record. So I do think that that's why it is so important And speaking of how important the lines are, speaking of how important defensive line could be as well, Eric Armstead getting a 5-year, $85 million from the San Francisco 49ers. So, again, you know what? You got to cash in on these big-time players. And you see how important the teams that were in the Super Bowl, like the Chiefs, deciding to put a tag on Chris Jones, and the 49ers extending Eric Armstead. So you see what the best teams in football do, how much they value the offensive line and defensive line. So I really do think that the Giants and Jets have to take notes from that and try to do the same exact thing. A lot of moves have happened so far in this NFL offseason, and there are more to come. And as they do happen, there will be more update videos, especially what the Giants and Jets decide to do in the draft. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, leave a like. Comment down below, what have you thought so far in the NFL offseason, and just you want to talk about anything sports related that we can talk about because of all these delays going on. And I mean, hopefully it isn't as late as they're saying with the July and the August and all that. That would just be awful. And I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do. Just going to have to watch regular TV, which really sucks. And I mean, again, play video games and whatnot, be outside and just play sports at home and what have you. So hopefully you guys are healthy and just being smart, like I said last time. So be smart, be safe, and see you next time.